Thank you. So I have a story to share with you today about an amazing company that thought they knew the way to obtain the benefits of lean. And it was a very humbling experience. It wasn't as smooth as they thought. They had many false starts. But we've got a pretty good story to tell, and I think we can all learn something from that. So I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I still really don't understand what this is about. So if you're working on this and you're stumbling and you feel a bit like an imposter, you're probably on the right track. Along the way, I've been really very fortunate. I have a lot of companies to thank where I bumbled my way along and tried different things. And really, everything I'm sharing with you, I learned from these people. So a little bit about Nationwide. Who's heard of Nationwide? We're in Europe. They're an American company, but they're pretty popular. You've known them? You've heard of them? So we're talking about an IT company. When I started with them, they spent $1.2 billion a year on their IT budget. They're down to just over $1 billion now. 9,000 people in IT. Most are in the United States, with a few in India, and a few are in Ireland, I believe. But mostly it's local, which is very rare. Over 10,000 servers and over 8 petabytes of data. This is a large company. It's more like a battleship than a speedboat in terms of change, in terms of really getting people's attention. It's a bureaucracy, basically. So what they've done is pretty amazing. In the past, you'll see a roadmap in a second of what we went through, but most recently we kind of did a tally and we said, what's going on here? In software engineering, we've engaged over 720 key people and had an amazing jump in quality and first pass yield. This was primarily done through the introduction of Agile. However, we've reached a point where things are not working as well as we'd like. What happens if you only do Agile? What happens? You get a little bit of a bottleneck? Yeah, so where is the flow in Agile? I don't mean to be anti-Agile, but basically we bring in Agile, we get a lot of great results on the development side, but then what happens when we release the software? It sits on the shelf, basically, or it doesn't get used to the full extent. But we did start there. We've improved in software engineering. It was really an application maintenance where we stumbled upon a very important lesson. It's really what I want to share with you today, and that is there were really two sides to this. This sounds like blasphemy, but a lean IT transformation is less about technology and more about people than it is about the tools. And I know this sounds crazy, but let me show you why. And then, of course, with Help Desk, we had an amazing surge in customer service, in quality, in flow. We had some really nice results. So when I arrived at Nationwide, I walked into a department and I was amazed to see Lean IT, the book that Steve and I wrote 5-6 years ago, sitting on every desk. I couldn't believe it. And they had this written on the wall. This was a definition of Lean IT. And they said, we really are using this basic definition to focus more on people, engaging people to improve the process to solve real problems. And there was not a technology change. It was a social change. It was a people change. That is a very different language, a very different discussion from what you'll normally find. So this is the journey that they were going through. They started dabbling with Agile in 24, and they really started to spread Agile throughout the development community. When Lean IT came out, they read it and they said, oh my God, we're not thinking broadly enough. We're not thinking about the people side of it. We're not thinking about the systems aspect to this. It was pretty much a tools launch, a tools-based launch. I'm very concerned that that's exactly what we're seeing now with DevOps. Now, there are some DevOps examples out there where people are talking about the social side of it. But more and more people that I speak with want to talk about the tools. And nothing against the tools, we need the tools, but it's only half of the equation. So really what we started to do is, when we got to application maintenance, we started to say, what kind of behavior do we want to drive? What kind of behavior can we inspire in people? And Dan, really, if you think about it, that's what he was just talking to us about. How do we create a safe environment where people engage at a very, very real level? It's not just about a tool, it's not just about checking a box, and it's not about following standard work. It's about being a lot more than what we are right now. So every day, people are coming to work and really engaging at a different level. So my second book, The Lean IT Field Guide, is basically a collection of the methods that we use to try to do that. Everybody has a definition of lean. We tried to boil it down to make it as simple and pure as possible. We want methodical problem solving to eliminate waste, variation, and overburden for the purpose of creating and managing flow. When we got everybody to say, that's really what we want to talk about today, it was a game changer. That seems very simple, and for people that have been working in lean, you'll say, oh, I've seen this for years. But we said, how do we mobilize this? How do we really get people to embed this in who they are? And when they look at the work, they use this approach. So in a conventional system, and Nationwide has definitely had this and still has it in pockets, it's such a large company, but authority ruled, top-down control, very much a results-focused organization. And Dan talked about experts. They were all about experts. They had expert staff, they had expert consultants that came in and said, this is the way. What we moved to was a very different model, not based on authority, but based on self-assumed responsibility. You can't give somebody responsibility. They have to pick it up. They have to take ownership of it. We moved from results to process. So we wanted to talk about a process focus. We still have experts, but the term we like to use is expert teams. So the team knows, go to the team. And again, we've stressed go and see. So go and see is we live at the Gemba. Now, we heard this from Dan too. We learn at the Gemba. We need to go to the Gemba. But do we have any managers in here that find it hard to go to the Gemba? For many people, if you're honest, it's not a comfortable place to go. It's not a comfortable thing to do. So we had to create systems that made it more likely that people would go to the Gemba and actually accomplish something successful. So I've used the term systems many times, and we've heard about systems thinking. It's amazing. This feels like déjà vu, but I love this quote from Teiichi Ono. He says, yes, there are many keys in the Toyota way, but the important thing is having all the elements as a system, seeing it as a system and daily practice. And what I see in most organizations is we're cherry picking. Cherry picking means we like this tool, we like this piece, but we don't really have a system, and it's not designed around an end state. So this is the system that we used at Nationwide to attempt to drive the right behavior. And the right behavior was a people-centric, ground-up ownership of real issues, enabled by leadership. So this is an old model of the Toyota way. It's been around a lot of time, a long, long time. But it's interesting that we've spent most of our adult careers talking about the left pillar, talking about continuous improvement. This is where the tools live, and this is what we love to do. We love to learn about value stream mapping in A3 and PDCA. And in IT, we like the technology tools. So this is the piece of the model where most people live. But it's interesting that the right pillar, I believe, is the key to true lasting change and engagement. It's respect for people. Respect for people is all about leading with respect. And most leaders I talk to, I like to ask, do you respect your people? What do you think the answer is? I've never met anyone that said, you know, we disrespect our people. They all say, oh, we love our people. They're the most important asset of the company. And I say, well, really, how do you respect your people? What do you think they say? We give them meaningful targets and we reward them when they hit their targets. We give them performance reviews and we give them a cake for their birthday. And we pay for a little IT training. Nothing wrong with that, but is that the kind of respect we're talking about? I don't believe it's enough. It's not enough. True lead with respect is creating an authentic connection with the other person to the point where you truly want to see the world through their eyes. That is difficult. There's nothing easy about that, particularly if the person is very different from you. It's about empathy. It's almost about compassion. And typically we don't talk about those things in the workplace. So it's much more principles-driven than results-driven. So at Nationwide, we basically talked about real-time management. That meant go to the Gemba. You should be at the Gemba every single day with a purpose. We talked about modeling behaviors. So we wanted C-level, director level, manager level, even team level to be modeling what we call ideal behaviors. If you ask people what are ideal behaviors, they don't know what that means. Or they say, well, I know what it must mean. It must mean we're doing the right thing. Yes, but we must be very specific. We had no ideal behaviors, so we developed some ideal behaviors. It was a game changer. And a very important tool was leader standard work. This has been around for years and years and years, and we're still not using it in many organizations. This was the way to create space and basically a support system for management to be at the Gemba, to start coaching, and to start learning about the business through the eyes of the people closest to the work. Instead of saying, I know all about it, I'm a manager, I'm an expert. So this is the model that really reflects the work that we did. It's got two basic pillars. The left pillar is all about creating value. It's also where many of the tools live. It's where Agile, it's where DevOps, operational side, DevOps doing the work lives. But the right side was all about creating and developing and connecting with people. So the foundational elements are the same. Nothing really changes there. Aligning purpose, improving process, daily problem solving. Shouldn't be that different from anything we've seen. But we said there's really two systems that have to be in place. The production system, which again is that left pillar that we're so good at, the tools of lean. But we also need a management system. So we've heard about a lean management system for a while. There's been some very good books on the topic. But at Nationwide, we said, how can we pull all that together so people see it as a single system, not as separate parts that they can cherry pick from? We found that the bonding elements, the glue, if you will, that would hold this all together was the visual management system and reflection. So we know about the visual management system, but reflection, daily reflection, is getting into the habit every single day of saying, what was I trying to do? What did I do? What did I expect from my actions? And what really happened? And reflecting on that and basically asking myself, what did I learn today that I want to remember forever? When we got people starting to think this way, we noticed a major change in behavior. So a few key pieces of this. It's all, again, it's that respect piece. We talk about trust, support, and accountability. But if you talk to people and you say, do you really trust management? Do you really trust your boss? Do you really trust the CIO? After a couple glasses of wine, they will say, no, I don't, or something stronger. So the trust really, it's an artificial trust. They will say, yes, I trust, everything's fine, I feel supported, but no. Where can you find this? Just go to the Gemba. When you walk up to the visual board of the team, what are they talking about? Are they basically throwing up what they call in Australia blowing sunshine upstairs, which basically means we put up nothing but green dots and we say everything's fine? Or do they have real problems? What about the Kaizen board? Is there activity? Are they engaged? Is it real or is it fake? So that's the first place I look. So this is what we call the lean management system. I like to call it 4 subsystems of excellence. And the core piece that we started with was the daily management system. So the daily management system was all about making the invisible work of IT as visible as possible. How do we make the invisible work of IT visible? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's called the visual management system. If you go to Nationwide, you will see more whiteboards than anywhere. I mean, they are everywhere. They've taken every piece of wall and they've put up whiteboard from the floor to the ceiling, and they've got the freestanding boards. Every team has a visual system. Right now, they're moving towards, and I'm concerned about it, they're moving towards virtual whiteboards because of co-located teams, because of multinational efforts. The problem with that, of course, is the challenge that we lose the people side of moving the sticky note, of standing up, of talking face-to-face. We're going to get through it, but we're running several experiments right now using Kaizen. But the visuality was so huge. It brought the people to the Gemba. It made the managers much more comfortable going to the Gemba because they had something to do, something to see, something to understand, and a place to learn. Respect for people. What did we do with respect for people? Well, what we had to do is show people that we cared about them enough to really, really invest in their development. I'm not talking about sending everybody to ITIL training or sending everybody to a conference. Yes, we have to invest in that kind of training, but this was very different. We started with leader standard work. Leader standard work helped us to drive the right behavior in our managers. We also taught people some basic coaching skills, all around problem-solving coaching. That was the only coaching we did. Then we had people going to Gemba, and we used Tier 2 of the visual management system to enforce the new behaviors of going to Gemba. We also had what we call Lead with Respect training. Basically, we took Michael Ballet's book. If you haven't read it, Lead with Respect, you need to read this book. And we took it and we said, why don't we just actually give people examples of what it feels like to experience these 7 practices. So I mentioned leader standard work. This is basically not rocket science, but for some reason I don't see it in a lot of places. We created what is essentially a calendar that creates time for managers to be lean leaders. What does that mean? Besides going to the Gemba, that's one-on-one time. That's coaching time. That's time for Kaizen. That's time for learning and reflection. That's time for sitting down with your peers and talking about what's working and what's not working. That's time for check and adjust. And doing that at a tiered level, we had everybody had a coach and everybody could be a coach. Now, right now, we're not there completely, but that's basically what rolled out using the leader standard work. Before leader standard work, basically being a lean leader was an option. It's no longer an option. It's really an obligation. It's your role if you want to be a member of the team. So why is daily Kaizen so important? Well, we've got these great tools, PDCA, Toyota Kata from Mike Rother, A3, value stream mapping. These tools have been around a long time. But we found if you lead with Kaizen events, 3, 4, 5-day events, and you expect the team to take that knowledge and move to daily problem solving, it doesn't happen. It's a myth. Instead, what we did was we embedded small daily improvements. Here's the question I like to ask the team. What's the smallest thing we can do today to make our work better? And you get to define what better is. Very different way of looking at it. So here's a board. You see we've got a story card with a problem. It's blocked. This is at tier 1. This is at the team level. We've got a piece of work that can't be done. Basically, at the project level, we see that this item here is identified as a problem. What are we going to do? Here's the beauty of a tiered management system and how we started to drive alignment at Nationwide. If we cannot solve it at the team level, we need resources, we need cooperation from other groups, it's outside of our circle of influence and control, we can take that and escalate it. We escalate it. First of all, we try PDCA. If we can solve it using A3 thinking, we do. But some problems are not that simple. They're cross-functional, they're cross-silo, we need support. So what we do is we share it. We share it as we move up the ladder, and this is basically the alignment piece. So what does alignment look like? Well, at Nationwide, it's a large company, we've got 4 tiers. We've got the front line, we've got the director, we've got the vice president, and we've got the C-suite. So that item that you saw before on the tier 1 board turns up on tier 2. If tier 1 can't fix it, it turns up on tier 2. And tier 2 says, can we fix it? This is the director level. They're doing a daily stand-up as well. So there's a roll-up of metrics and a roll-up of issues, and we're making the invisible work visible at the next level. If they see chronic problems, there's an incredible learning opportunity for them. Because if this is a surprise, who's not going to the Gemba? If this shows up on their board and they say, I had no idea, that's not a good thing. That means they don't know. They're not in the loop. They're not showing their face. They don't really have their finger on the pulse of the teams. So there's a coaching opportunity here. So we've got this at the tier 2 level. If tier 2 can't fix the problem, what do you think happens? It goes to a tier 3 board. As this gets escalated, it's an opportunity, in many cases, if it reaches tier 3, it's almost always a systemic problem. It crosses functional areas, and more than one team in the business is feeling the pain of this issue. So we notice when we start knocking down these issues, they actually have broader implications or broader effects. So here's the tier 4 board. This took 2 years before the C-level wanted to do this. And you can see it's huge. Now, they meet once a week, and they do a huddle. Their huddle lasts between 15 and 30 minutes. But sometimes they will come in the middle of the week. If the CIO says, or somebody on the CIO team says, we need an all-hands meeting, this is where they go, and they have their meeting here. If it's a specific problem, it's very easy for them to trace it right through tier 3, tier 2, and even tier 1. When you see the CIO at tier 1 talking to the people, it almost makes you want to cry. It's a beautiful thing because you've got the CIO at the Gemba and the people are not afraid. I have not seen this anywhere else. I know it exists elsewhere, but I personally haven't been lucky enough to see it. So the CIO that I'm referring to is a humble leader. He's a naturally humble person, brilliant thinker, and he doesn't have to be the most powerful ego in the room. That's why this is working so well. So this is another way to look at the system that we've created. It's basically real-time management because we've got the daily teams trying to solve real problems that matter the most to them. We're creating visibility tier by tier by tier with rolled-up metrics. And the metrics, we don't have time to talk about the metrics, but it's metrics that matter to the team. If the team says, oh yeah, we love our metrics, we need to ask, why are they helpful? If the team in their own words can't explain why the metrics are helpful, we need different metrics. And often I find the metrics are just taking up space. People are barely looking at them, so they don't really matter. So the escalation goes this way, but the feedback and the coaching goes this way. And basically what we have found is, and we've kind of stumbled on this, we're getting tighter and tighter alignment. And you hear the language of the different groups at their different stand-ups is more and more common. So we have better focus, better engagement at every level. And the people at the front line really do feel like their voice is being heard, and there's more trust, there's more accountability. And this is a consequence of the tiered system. So if you stand back and look at what Nationwide has done, they really started with Agile. That's what got their attention. Then they realized Agile would not get them there completely. They realized it was a great piece of the puzzle. It wasn't enough of the puzzle. Then they discovered Lean IT. And I was talking with the gentleman, my co-author, Tom Pater, who really drove this first wave of transformation. I said, what do you think was the key piece in the journey so far? He said it was when we moved from a tools-based system of Agile and we started thinking about the principles of Lean IT. We changed our focus and we realized it was a balanced focus between the principles and behavior as well as just the tools. It wasn't one, it wasn't the other. It had to be both. Now, for the last 2 years, like many other organizations, Nationwide is looking at DevOps. They want to extend the value stream from build to operate. They want to take the entire Lean IT value stream and make it more efficient, make it flow. However, we had people start to go where? Directly for the tools. And very quickly, it was Lean IT that allowed people to stay grounded and say, yes, we will use tools. Yes, we want to create flow. How do we do it without losing the balance between technology and people? And I think that is our challenge in IT right now. Because when I talk to people in DevOps that are excited about DevOps, it's many different things to many different people. I think we all want flow, better quality, better customer responsiveness, and really we want to enable our customers to achieve more value. But if we lose track of this other side of it, we're going to make the same mistakes that we did in lean manufacturing, that we did in Agile, and that we've done in that we did in healthcare, for that matter. In many other industries, we've seen this. So basically, taking that two-pillar approach, now Nationwide is looking at this as a system. How do we maintain this as a system? And they're really trying to balance those two as they go forward. So the DevOps piece is very, very new, but I like where it's going because, again, we've got this emphasis on how do we engage people, let's make the work visible, and let's learn as we move forward. So if you look at the journey, we moved from 3 development lines to 25 development lines. We achieved much greater levels of first-pass quality and productivity. Project management really morphed and started to use more agile techniques in project management, and we had much better, this is an insurance company, they're very keen on risk management, better dependency management. We saw much better coordination among projects. That was what we call our lean production system. Now with DevOps, we're trying to move horizontally across the value stream. And what we're finding is the lean management system is the connective piece that we need. We need the tools, but really the lean management system is what's coming in to really help us in that area. So final reflection. Focus more on behavior than on thinking. So we've heard this for years, but most organizations have not done the hard work of articulating what ideal behavior needs to look like at each level. So what are the behaviors, what are the tools, and what is the cadence? Without a cadence, the tools won't work. So we need a cadence, a rhythm to going to Gemba, to having our meetings, to escalation. It's got to be orchestrated or else it won't work. And then be firm on the process, not the solution. So what we're firm on is structured problem solving. What we're not pushing is the solution. The solution is emergent from the people closest to the work. That's respect for people. It's not an expert-based system, it's an expert team system. So the team figures out what to do. Tie everything back to benefits realization. If you don't measure it, it won't work. Now, I resisted this for some time, but I realized if we don't have the C-level suite on our side, we can't get funded. They won't make time for this. So if we can't tie it back to metrics that matter, we've got a problem. What I'm not saying, this is all about efficiency and cost reduction, but it's got to be metrics that we can tie the behavior to. If not, it becomes too soft, too vague, and it's very hard to sell for senior management. They will lose interest and they will disengage. If you're not stumbling, if you're not checking and adjusting, if you're not having to pivot, then you're not doing this correctly. This should be very painful. And anybody that says, oh, no, this is easy, I've got the slides, it's going to be a piece of cake. It's not. It's messy, messy stuff. And if it's not messy, I would suggest either you're very, very fortunate or maybe you're not making as much change as you think you are. And then lastly, you have to consider this a lean management system. It doesn't have to be this one, but what are the tools, processes, and cadence that you're going to put into place that will drive leadership at all levels? We've been talking about this for 40 or 50 years. I don't know when we're going to learn. Dan mentioned this earlier in his talk. When you go to the Gemba, everything you see is a reflection of yourself if you're the leader. If you don't like what you see, look in the mirror. It's time to start with yourself. You have to really live and be that change. And people could tell if you're faking it. So you have to model that behavior. And lastly, everything we've been talking about, visuality, trust, accountability, it requires an extreme amount of patience and humility. If you don't have patience and humility, get a coach. You need to develop patience and humility because this is difficult stuff. And I don't mean it's impossible, but it's very humbling. You're dealing with a lot of experts every day, experts in their field, and you're pushing them into a zone of uncertainty, and there's a lot of fear. That's just the honest truth. If you don't have the courage to face that fear, they won't. There's just no way. So the leader has to have the courage to come in and expose themselves and be vulnerable and not have all the answers and to say, I know where we need to take our organization. I don't know how to get there, and I need you guys. I desperately need you guys. Can we do this together? That's really what this is about. So everything that I just talked about is, and the kind of how you do that is kind of in a roadmap in our second book, and I want to thank you very much for your time.
Nationwide is on your side.
Very good. She knows the jingle.
That's going to be in my head all day. I had a quick question. So you mentioned, or you showed on your House of Lean IT,
yes,
that reflection was the bond or the glue that really held the house together and produced the results, which really made me think of Dan Jones' mention of, lean as a strategy is really a personal strategy. So how can managers easily start implementing this habit of personal reflection?
So I was very fortunate. I had a coach many years ago who shared with me this idea of daily reflection. And it was an amazing lady, and she said there are 3 questions that you need to ask yourself every day. And I started doing that, and you actually get very good at this. So this is one form of reflection. People like some kind of a framework. So the 3 questions that I've been asking for many years now, the first question is, and I write these down in a journal, but you don't have to. The first question is, what is the one thing that I did well today? just one thing. And basically, I want to reinforce certain behaviors. So if I went to the Gemba, I did more observing, more understanding, and less talking. I might write down, hey, that was a good thing. If I was more patient with somebody and I let them talk through their own solution instead of cutting in and telling them what to do, I might write that in my journal. The next question is, what is one thing I could do better tomorrow? There's never a loss in that category. You can always think of something. This is not about beating yourself up. This is about saying, if there was an area I wanted to be more effective in, what might it be? And then we focus on that for tomorrow. The third question is very powerful, and it ties back to becoming committed to daily learning. And that is, what is the one thing I learned today that I want to remember forever? Now, when you have these questions in your back pocket, you go through the day looking for the answers, because you know you're going to be asking these at the end of the day. So those are good questions. And then in a group, so I shared this, we've got some people that actually like to do this in a group setting. So I'm a firm believer in what we call the buddy system. You find somebody that will work with you. It can be a group or just one other person. And you say, can we get together and talk about this and reflect together? That also works.
Thank you. Other questions for Mike?
So thank you very much, Mike. It was really a compelling story. I feel an urge of going to nationwide and do a Gemba walk and meeting people and observing the visuals. One part that I'm still processing is the way you scale the system. Nowadays, when we're trying to build flat organizations, when people on the ground are taking ownership, yours is title-driven. It's fairly hierarchical. So escalations go up. Feedback seems to be looping, but yet it was showing as going down. So it's slightly different from what I'm personally advocating for or being used to. So did you try other models that are not title-based? Because directors, they do not produce end-to-end value. So building a team of directors, team of your C-level executives, did you try any other ways, or you think that's the only way of dealing with building, scaling basically the way you do in IT?
So we did do various experiments, and we tried different things, but very quickly we realized that creating a connective chain using the visual management system was the perhaps most feasible way to do this. Because for one thing, it was very obvious which teams were doing this and which teams weren't. If you went to an area and they didn't have a visual system up or it wasn't updated, you could see that they hadn't bought in. So there was an opportunity to understand why it didn't work. Before Nationwide was started in Agile, they were deep into CMMI. And anybody gone down that? And they did that, and they said, I forget what level they were at, but they had spent a lot, invested a lot. They were doing this, and they said, nothing is really changing in terms of behavior. So again, what we really used is experimentation. So the beauty of framing anything we do as an experiment is it removes fear, because you cannot fail from an experiment if you pause to reflect and learn. There's no failure. Once people started to get a hang of that, it became part of the language. And basically what they've done is taken they're not done by any means. This is just a piece of the organization. But they've taken that organization and flattened it. And we're talking about a huge skyscraper with many floors. And when you're there, you can feel it. You really can feel it. This is real. This is not kind of a fake lean smoke and mirrors thing. This is the real deal. And when you go in and see this, you say, this is really special. What's driving the behavior? What's driving the behavior are two things, in my opinion. One is they have a strong belief that people really matter. That was part of their culture. The other one is they've got a work system, which is what we call the lean management system, that's influencing daily behavior. If you took the belief out, they wouldn't buy into the lean management system. If you didn't have the lean management system, there wouldn't be a framework to drive the right behavior. Oh, measurements? So there are many measurements, but perhaps one of the things that people want to know is, have they had any savings from lean? This comes up a lot. And I remember years ago, Steve and I were working with a large company, and most of our benefits were intangible benefits. We had removed waste, we had saved time, but we hadn't saved hard dollars. We had some hard dollars saved. You know what I mean? Hard euro savings. We didn't have a lot of that. Nationwide had a very different experience. Nationwide right now on an annual basis is saving about 75 million US. And the reason this occurred was they had a huge dependency on contract labor. So these were not employees, these were people that they were bringing in and spending a lot of money on. When we introduced these techniques, they basically bled themselves off. They removed the dependency on contract labor, and when projects were over, they realized that the teams now had the capacity to do the work. So that's basically the kind of the key measurement. But what they're looking at, of course, is first pass yield, defects per release, mean time to repair, very similar measurements that anyone else would look at. But I know at the CEO level, they're looking at, did we save any money? Basically, they want, the insurance industry is a very competitive industry with kind of a stable market and not a lot of movement. So they're looking for efficiencies. And I warned them, I said, if we lead with efficiencies, this isn't going to work. We need to lead with principle-based behavior. And that's where we are so far.
Thank you for your story. What I see is you've built up a beautiful system of cascading stand-up meetings, and the idea is that, impediments, that they are brought up easily so they can be quickly removed.
Exactly.
What I've seen now several times, it can be very difficult for the teams to really bring up the important impediments, as people seem to think that leaders don't appreciate it. So I actually wondered, do you have any recommendations or keys or tricks how to build a culture of embracing impediments and what's not going wrong?
So here's the key, if there is such a thing as a key, or tips or tricks. Once we got senior management to authentically discuss problems as if they were a good thing. So to hear a leader say, before we discuss that, I want to thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention. And they meant it. People realized you're not going to shoot me for having a problem. So bringing up problems, the first thing we did was acknowledge and recognize that it took courage for somebody to say that. And if we heard of a manager or somebody else not treating a problem that way, it was a coaching opportunity. We'd go to that person and we'd say, that's the old way of thinking. We don't want to sweep problems under the rug anymore. Actually, you're a hero if you shine a light on a problem. But the thing that changed the game is when the CIO started doing it. Because as soon as he started doing it, all his direct reports did it. As soon as the direct reports did it, who do you think started doing it? The entire management team. Here's the problem. Typically, what I see is the management team gets it, but not the VPs and not the CIO. So if the CIO and the VPs are saying, get out, I don't want to talk about it, that's not true, they're in denial, basically, then you don't get the trust. So basically, you've got to get the people at the top involved. So one of the things that I like to do is we start with leadership. We start with leadership. We don't start with the Kaizen event, which I did for many years. We don't start with foundation training with the people closest to the floor. They want it, But first, we need to invest some time in leadership so they truly understand what this is about. If they don't want to do this, if they're not really committed, and if they're not going to commit to personal development, which is what Dan spoke of as well, this is not going to work. You'll have pockets of improvement, but you're not going to be able to transform the organization. There's just no way. It won't work. People do what their boss does most frequently.
Thank you, Mike.